What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about big factors involving Tesla, and what you should be watching for as time progresses. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. Soft ends in just a couple of weeks. Check it out before they run out. Anyways, for Tesla, I just want to mention that right now we're in a very, very interesting place. Tesla is range bound right now, and we're going to be watching to see which way it ends up breaking. But just note that we have some interesting stuff coming out for tomorrow I want to talk about, and also some news about Tesla before I break down these charts. Tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. There's not really much data coming out. We just have the business optimism index report and a couple of other things like bill auctions and note auctions. It's all very, very minor. So I'm not really expecting anything too crazy. Today, the market was just range bound as we had some minor pieces of data in then Apple's product launch event. They did very, very well at explaining their new iPhone 16, their new AirPods, and then new updates to the Apple Watch. So very, very cool stuff. But the thing is, Apple didn't really make much of a move. It just pumped and dumped the entire time, just being range bound. And the market pretty much just followed that trend. So going into tomorrow, I just want to say there is one important thing to note about tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be the last day until CPI comes out. CPI comes out on Wednesday, September 11th, before the market ends up opening. So sometimes what's been happening is the market already knows what CPI will look like, or there's a lot of optimism associated with CPI. And sometimes the market does pump approaching CPI. This has been happening for the last couple of reports. So that does imply there's a possibility of some upside that could be coming to the markets just temporarily. But it doesn't guarantee anything about CPI until we get the data. So just know that the last couple of CPIs that came out, the day before, the Tuesday before, we did see some upside in the markets. And we'll see if that ends up lasting this time or not. Now, for other factors about the market, I just want to say that sentiment is shifting a little bit. Right now, the market's getting very close to neutral. We used to be very, very fearful. Now we're just at fear, getting very close to neutral. There's a little bit of a shift right over here. Momentum is currently at fear, but it's starting to shift upwards, so it could get closer to neutral if we continue to hold support and if the S&P 500 starts pushing. And then the put and call option ratio is currently at extreme fear. We'll be watching to see, do the shorts get squeezed and does the market rally more? Or is this about to just continue to spike as the market gets a rug pull? We'll be watching that depending on CPI. And then market volatility is neutral because the VIX is decreasing in value. That could affect premiums quite a bit for those who are holding options. So just be careful for the S&P 500, for SPY, or anything else that's out there. Now, I just want to talk about what's happening with the target rate right now. The market's now thinking there's a 70% chance to get a 25 basis point cut, and about a 30% chance to get a 50 basis point cut. The market's indecisive right now. We're just waiting to see what happens with data. So be very patient. As far as Tesla goes, I just want to say that there wasn't really too much important news that came out. However, I do want to talk about the Chinese numbers just very briefly. I went into a lot more details in my second to last video. So if you guys want more information about this, look at my, I think it's my third to last video actually. That's where I talked about this. But for now, their Chinese numbers were not too bad. In August, they sold about 86,000 Chinese made EVs, and about 63,000 were actually in China itself. We're seeing a 17% growth month over month and a 3% increase year over year. However, year to date, the sales are still a little bit below what we saw from last year. So it still is, for the most part, it was more good, but more like so in the different aspects of it. But it's good to see that their sales are still catching up with the last year's gains for China. So not bad whatsoever. Volume is only at about 67 million, a little bit below average for Tesla. And then short volume is starting to go up a little bit. It's now at 52%. And the last thing is Morgan Stanley gave Tesla an overweight rating. GLJ Research gave Tesla a sell rating. So a little bit of a shift from their current sentiment. And then the last thing is the price price ratio is flat as Tesla is just continuing to trade sideways. And then in terms of seasonality, we do tend to be green about 51% of the time on Tuesdays. And we tend to see more volatility when we open. So during the opening hours, the most volatile hour. And also at 1 p.m., we do tend to see more volatility. 55% of the time we're green. And besides that, that's pretty much it, at least for Tesla. There's not really much else to talk about that I saw that was too significant. So now let's focus on the charts. What else is going on with these charts? I just want to say that one good thing about Tesla is Tesla's been riding this yellow trend line very nicely these last couple of weeks. We bounced off this, bounced off this, bounced off it, and we bounced off it again. So we're holding this yellow trend line, which means that Tesla is, for the short term, on a somewhat uptrend. I know that for the long term, for the last few years, Tesla's been on a downtrend. I'm just talking about the short term in this video. And the thing about Tesla is, are we about to get a rug pull or not? That depends on our levels. So Tesla is very tight right now, it's consolidating, and it's very news sensitive. So sometimes it's very difficult to predict what it's going to do because of the news. However, if Tesla manages to push back up, we're looking at this resistance at this 217 area. If that breaks, we're looking for 220 to push all the way up to this 222 area and 225. If we break down, you're going to be looking at the 214s. If we don't hold the 214s, I think we're going to be coming down to fill this gap all the way down to 211, and possibly 210 can be retested, and we'll see if we bounce off the trend line or not from there. So those are going to be your very, very key levels for Tesla. We're just completely range bound right now, and we're just continuing to consolidate. Now, in my opinion, considering the fact that the market has some potential for upside going into tomorrow, the fact that Tesla's holding up nicely, this does favor the fact that Tesla might attempt to rebound a bit tomorrow, but I can't make any promises because it really depends on the news and such. So for tomorrow, I think we're most likely going to see a lot of consolidation on Tesla, a lot of sideways choppy price action. There may be an attempt to get back up to 220, but I think Tesla's just going to be range bound. Now, that's just a temporary move just for tomorrow. With CPI coming, we don't know if Tesla will ultimately get a rug pull or not. That depends on CPI and also the news for Tesla. So we'll just have to wait and see. But for tomorrow, it looks like we're going to be very range bound, see a lot of sideways consolidation between 214 and 220. There might be an attempt to go up to about 220 or a little bit higher, but I think there's going to be a lot of chop tomorrow for Tesla looking at the technicals. Now, don't worry, guys. Tesla will make a much bigger move depending on CPI. So we'll have to wait until Wednesday to see a much larger move, in my personal opinion. For SPY, this was also range bound, but it's building some strength because we're holding this trend line very nicely now. So, from how I see things, it's very simple. Don't be fooled by all these lines, okay? If we're bearish on SPY, okay, if this is about to turn down, you want to first off lose this yellow trend line. See this yellow line that SPY has been riding up. If we lose that, we're looking for basically 542. If we lose the 542.5 to 542 area, we get rug pulled, and I think we're coming down to about 538. Okay. If we're bullish, you want to be riding the trend line up, continuing to ride it, and this will push us all the way up to about this next imbalance fill, taking us up to this 550 area. It really is that simple, guys. Hold above 547, and as long as we hold above this yellow trend line, we favor 550. Lose the yellow trend line, we just consolidate. Lose 542, we turn bearish. Those are going to be your very, very key levels. In my opinion, okay, I think that we're forming a nice wedge right here, and I think that when you zoom out and look at the daily is still showing a little bit of life, but I think the 4 hour is the most important one. The 4 hour time frame on SPY is looking a little bit more bullish. So this is favoring a push for 548, if not 550. So I think what's going to happen tomorrow to SPY is, and don't forget to watch your levels just to be safe because you never know what could happen. But my prediction is we consolidate like this, we retest this trend and ride this up, eventually push for that 550 area. That's my prediction for SPY. 548, then maybe 550, then we will see if we consolidate after that. It might be a little bit of a push to form a cup, and then we'll see if we get a rug pull after CPI or not. But that's the most likely prediction, in my opinion. For ES, okay, if we end up dipping below 54.80, we're looking for 54.65. If we lose the 50 EMA, we're dumping all the way down to 54.48 and then all the way down to these lower levels. If we're bullish, we want to break past 54.90 to test 5500. And if that breaks, we're going all the way up to 55.20. So in my opinion, we're forming a very, very nice cup-like structure. And I think what's going to most likely happen is we dip a little bit. We see a little bit of a dip before we continue to push higher for that 5500 area. Now, whether or not we get a rug pull after CPI comes out depends, but I just want to say that for now, we are looking like we're forming a cup, and it looks a little bit more bullish on ES, especially on the 4 hour, in my personal opinion. That's just a short-term projection. That's what the charts are suggesting. We'll see if that lasts, but don't forget CPI is the bigger factor. Nvidia has a very similar setup as Tesla, not Tesla, sorry, as SPY, because we're riding this trend line very, very nicely. Now, this imbalance to the left at this 108 target is going to be our magnet, and it's actually pushing this up very, very nicely so far. So in my opinion, here's what you want to watch for Nvidia. If you're bearish, you want to see this lose the trend line and lose 105. If that fails us, we're going down to 104. And if that finally fails us, we're going to be looking for a rug pull. Okay, if we lose 104, we turn bearish. If we hold this trend line, we could slowly inch our way up to the resistance at 108. And if that breaks, we're going up to 110. What I think is going to happen is this. I think tomorrow we might dip a little bit to retest the trend line. Then as long as we hold this, I think we push up for 108 and 110. I favor that a little bit more on Nvidia. We'll see if that ends up being the case. For Bitcoin, we're doing a good job at holding up. We actually pushed quite nicely after getting some bullish news, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin dips a little bit towards this 56,600 area. Then we try to bounce after that to push up to 58,000. So I favor upside a little bit more for a nice cup-like structure. I think that Bitcoin may dip a bit tomorrow morning, then it tries to bounce. That's the most likely case. So for NQ, for those who are interested in futures, NQ looks a little bit more promising to me because of the fact that we're forming a nice consolidation and we're forming a nice wedge right now. So I think this looks a little bit more promising. I would say to watch resistance if we break past 18,729 around that area. We're going to be looking for a push all the way up to about this 18,800 targets. That's going to be close to our 200 EMA. And if that breaks, we're going up to 19,000. If we reject and we end up losing 18,600, we could be tipping all the way down to 18,500, even below. But in my personal opinion, and there's a good chance we're trying to form like a cup right over here, and we favor a push for 18,850. So I think NQ is going to dip a little bit to these EMAs. As long as we hold them, we should be pushing up for 18,730 and eventually push up for that 18,850 target. So I favor upside a little bit more on this chart, but whether or not this continues will also depend on CPI later on. But for now, we might push a little bit approaching CPI. That's the most likely case for now. Look for a dip and a bounce, and we'll see how it goes. For the QQQ, we did relatively well today. We actually held support, so you could see how buyers are stepping in. This looks a little bit more bullish. We're holding support very nicely so far. If hypothetically we lose the yellow trend line, okay, we're going to be dipping down to about 451 most likely. And if that fails us, I think we could come down to fill the gap all the way down to 447. So if we lose 451 to 450, we're going all the way down to 447 for a rug pull. If we hold the trend line, we're going to be pushing up for 458 and eventually 460. In my opinion, what's more favorable is us trying to push up higher because we're riding this trend line very nicely. And like I said before, historically, for the last couple of CPIs, the market pushed approaching CPI. If you actually look back at the charts, for Apple's range bound, unfortunately, not really doing much. We have a tendency of rejecting off like 221, even 223. We have a tendency of getting bought back up around this 217 area. So we're going back and forth and back and forth. So I think what's going to likely happen is Apple could dip a little bit closer to about this, 219 area, maybe a little bit below that, and get bought back up and just remain range bound. Last couple of days, it's just completely range bound, so give it some time. Not really doing much, but my only concern is the fact that we are making lower highs. So there is technically a risk for it to start dipping if that does end up failing. But my personal opinion is that we're just range bound for now. We have to wait and see which way it breaks. If we continue to close above 223, we will turn a little bit more bullish. If we close below 217, we turn a little bit more bearish. Otherwise, Apple looks very range bound. We have to give it some time just to see how it develops. I also want to call out NEO real quick. This is actually a really interesting chart. We've been pumping like crazy the last couple of days. We're going to be testing our 200 EMA on the daily time frame at 5.61. If we break that, we're going up to 6. If we reject, we're going back down to 5.25. Looks kind of bullish, but we'll see if we break resistance. Palantir had some bullish news. They're going to be listed on the S&P 500. Good news for them. So the daily and 4-hour look pretty nice. We look bullish. As long as we hold structure, if we lose 34, we're going to return back down to about the 32 area, which is where we have this resistance. If we break past 35, we're going to continue to push for 36. I think Palantir looks bullish on the daily. I think we're doing a good job. I think so far we favor the upside. For Supermicro, we have a bullish divergence forming. This looks pretty good. If we end up breaking past 418 as resistance, this is also very close to our 20 EMA. I think we go all the way up to about, for Supermicro, we go all the way up to about 430. And if 430 breaks, we have this gap to fill all the way up to about the 440 area. If we're bearish and we lose 400, we're going to be dipping all the way down to about 388. I think this looks a little bit more bullish. I think the 4 hours looking pretty good. I think we might try to push a little bit higher, but we'll see if we break the 20 EMA in resistance. We'll see how things end up going. For now, it's looking like it's showing some life. It looks a little bit promising trying to follow Nvidia. For Rivian, I'm a little concerned about this because we just keep getting rejected off every single one of these pumps. We have this gap to fill below in this imbalance. It might dip towards the high 12s and then try to bounce after that, especially considering the fact that it was red despite EVs being green. It's not a good sign. So it might dip and then bounce. For SoFi, I'm going to double check this. SoFi is looking pretty good on the 4-hour time frame, but the issue with SoFi is the fact that we're technically on a downtrend. So if we manage to break past 7.18, we're going to be looking for a push for 7.3. If we lose 7, we're going to be dumping all the way down to 6.7. This looks to me like it's going to be testing 7.18 and then consolidate. So I'm not really seeing much with it. It might just consolidate for the most part. The Russell's looking pretty decent, but there's going to be a big test coming on the Russell 2000, the IWM. So what I see happening is we might dip a little bit here, looking at this red bar, and we'll be watching to see, do we hold 208 and establish a higher low compared to this low right here? If we make a higher low, we could be looking for a bounce to 212 like this. But if we lose the low or retest it, there could be a bigger dump coming if we don't hold 206. I'm starting to think that I might dip a little bit and try to rebound off that support. So we'll see how, if we hold 208, I think we're going to be dipping to test 208 and we'll see if we bounce. So watch for that. For AMD, what I like about AMD is the fact that we're looking bullish on the PPO and we're trying to break resistance right here. We have a big resistance at 139. If we break that on AMD, we're pushing up for 142.69. If it rejects, we're coming back down towards the trend line for a backtest of 135. So we will see if we could break 139. I think we're going to be pushing a little bit higher tomorrow to test it, and we'll see if it breaks or not. If it breaks, we remain bullish. If not, we reject. We will have to wait and see. For ARM, we're looking a little bit more bullish. This is because of bullish news that came out. So this is what trumped our bearish technicals from yesterday, by the way. So we had some bullish news. Obviously, news can sometimes trump technicals. So if 125 fails, we're looking for 123 and 120. That's where this imbalance happens to be. If we hold above 125, I think this goes all the way up to at least 130, if not 133. So as long as 125 holds, we look a little bit more bullish. We're looking for 130 and 133. It looks a little bit more bullish to me. For Coinbase, the 4-hour is holding this trend line very nicely. If we end up rejecting, we end up losing 155. I think we'll be dipping all the way down towards the 150 area. If we hold this support at 155, we're looking for a push all the way up towards this 160 area. So we're doing a good job at holding up so far. I think there's a good chance that this continues to hold, and I favor upside for coin all the way up for this 160 target, as long as we hold the trend line. Amazon looks a little bit more bullish. Instead of worrying about the inverse cup and handle now, I'm more concerned about the range. So it's kind of shifted in a way where it's just range bound. If we lose 174, the 20 and 50 EMAs, we're looking for a dump back down to 171. If we hold above that, we're looking for a push all the way up to 178. I think the 4-hour is looking more bullish, and Amazon's going to be pushing for 178. So we'll see how we end up moving. But this is favoring an upside move to 178. For Meta is range bound right now. We have 506 as resistance, not to mention 510. And we have the support all the way down here around 50. Basically, support's going to be very, very key around 500. So I think we're just range bound on Meta. It's not really doing much. We might try to push a little higher, so we'll see how it goes. Be very, very patient nonetheless. For Microsoft, we're looking a little bit more bullish on the 4-hour time frame. As long as we hold it above 407, we're looking for a push for 410. If we end up losing support right here at 407, we'll be dipping back down to 404. So I'm favoring upside for this 410 area. We dipped a bit. We did get that dip to 402 only to get bought back up. So I did call out the dip and then we got bought after that. For Google, we have basically 150 as a key level. If we don't hold that, we need to get back above that or else we're dipping to 148. And it still looks bearish unless we try to reclaim 150. So we'll see how it goes. DJT is forming a double bottom. Might try to push higher. If we could try to close and hold above 18.14, so I think we could be looking for the 19s. If we lose 18.14, we could be dipping, but this does favor upside a little bit more with the double bottom. We also have the debate coming up, I think, tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. That could lead to more attention for this. The VIX is also dipping a little bit. It has like a double top, which looks bearish. I think it's going to be dipping to 18.18. 18.88, excuse me. If that fails us, we're dipping down to 17.5, which could be, a sign the market's going to push a little higher, approaching CPI. The 10-year is dipping a little bit. We'll see how this reacts. It's going to depend on CPI. Same thing with the dollar. We'll see if the dollar could break out or not. We're just going to be very patient as well with this. I'm not too concerned about tomorrow. We're just going to focus on CPI. So with that being said, guys, I want to thank you all so much for listening. The market is still looking promising. I think that the market has a lot of ranges being established with some upside potential. Tesla, one could argue we have like this head and shoulders or whatever, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. It's more about the range. So focus on the levels in the range, and then watch for a big move on Wednesday once we get CPI data. Until then, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for your attention, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow before the market opens. And just know that Tesla is moving a little bit different from the market. It's just range bound, whereas the market looks like it wants to push a little bit more. That does give Tesla some potential to push. So we'll see how it goes. Until then, I thank you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow for another update. Thank you for listening, and peace out.